Alright, so we're going to tie a baitfish pattern called a Kinky Muddler. We're here in Baja, and I'm going to show you, it's an easy pattern to tie. I'm going to show you an easy way to make it. So first grab some bucktail about that thickness. You're going to want this to extend to almost the end of the tail. You're going to put some saddle hackles over this. You want the white to end just short of where the saddle hackles end. Here you go. And I usually don't taper it, I just square it off like this, tie it in, trap it in a noose of thread, and then move the bucktail around the shank 360. It'll be locked in and start the 3D profile of that pattern. So now what we're going to do is we're going to lay saddle hackles over this, and we're going to tent them. So we're not going to tie them flat wing style, and we're not going to tie them deceiver style, but we're going to create a little slanted roof at the top. And that's that way the fly swims better and the water flows under the saddle hackle. So here's how you start out doing it. You take a saddle hackle that goes a little bit beyond the white end and you tie it in a 45-degree angle with just 2 wraps of thread. Do the same thing on the other side. Remember, you're trying to create, it's like the dorsal surface of a baitfish, like that. So we've got that. You don't need to trim that off yet. And you can mix feathers. Sometimes I'll put pink or purple second. Here we have some blue. We're going to lay it over again at that angle. Just 2 wraps. Like that. They don't all have to be the exact same length, and in fact sometimes it helps to stagger them. You get a little better movement in the tail area. And I usually like, this is a size 2/0 hook, so I usually like 3 pairs of saddles. We have another funky blue color here, so we'll lay this over the top. And then you'll get a couple of different shades like a real baitfish. And same thing on this side. So before I trim that off, what you'll see is you've created, this is Atlantic salmon fly tires technique, you've created basically a slanted roof, and it's just like the dorsal taper of a baitfish. Bind all that down and trim off the butt ends. And it's okay if it's a little messy here because all of this body material is going to be covered over. I usually bind it down like this. Now, one thing is, I like to consolidate these feathers just so they stay in that orientation. And there's a couple of different ways to do it. But my preferred way of doing it is to put a wrap either under it like that and prop it up. So you just slip it under. Or if you want to prop it up even a little more, to help it blend into the head, you can actually do a wrap 360 around it like this. And you'll see it's canted up just at about a 45-degree angle, but that way that fly will never foul and you still have that orientation of the feathers. So now we're going to start building the body with Steve SF Flash Blend, but you can use kinky fiber and all kinds of synthetics. I think this is the best, the texture of this stuff is the best. So I like to start on the bottom of the fly. You take out a hank like this and double it over. You'll see that is, you know, if you're tying deer hair, people would talk about a pencil thickness. This is less than a pencil thickness. But it's enough to just start the taper, to start right in front of the wings. And again, if you look there, you'll see that there's a little cavity underneath where the wings are set in, so the water will flow in there and really animate the tail. So this is how you tie it, and this is the thing that seems to confuse people. You want to create dimension in the fly, a 360 sort of cylindrical look. What you do is you tie it in crossways this way at a 45-degree angle, maybe make 2 wraps of thread, that's all you need. Double it over on the other side of the hook shank to create a V so it straddles the fibers, and that's all you need, 2 or 3 wraps to hold it in place. Then we're going to do the top of the fly using the exact same technique. We're going to do that V-tie, and what the V-tie does is it creates basically shoulders on it. And depending upon the baitfish you want to imitate, if you want to imitate a bunker or a sardina, which is deep body, you can trim it flatter side to side but taller top to bottom. If you want a mullet, you can trim it more cylindrically. But you always want some bulk up front because that's what's going to make the fly swim better. Again, tie in 1 or 2 wraps, fold it over in a V like that. Make sure you have some hair trailing back over the tail so you have a smooth transition. And you'll notice it's all lumpy, but we're going to take care of all that. We're going to make all of that look good. So don't worry about the big mess that you're creating now. Now I'm going to take what remains of this white hair. I deliberately left a little long, and I'll use it to put in the second tie in the bottom. Same thing. So this would be like the equivalent of stacking deer hair. You just got to do this repeatedly up and down the shank. See if we have enough blue left here. I think we probably do. Trim it at an angle like that. Cross it over. Trap it. You just get a little noose of thread right there. And you can see we're starting to build the width in the fly. Now, as you're tying it, I don't bother to pre-taper this hair so it looks like a big electrocuted mess. But don't worry about it. When we trim it, and I'll show you how to trim it, it'll all look good in the end. Double over the white again. We're just going to do the same thing. And we're basically going to follow the same procedure until we get to the very nose of the fly. Same thing, I'm doing a few wraps. And you notice I'm not really cranking down on this. I'm not even putting glue in. I don't find that it's necessary. I find that these flies hang together really well. And all you need to do is glue up at the front because each application of the fiber covers up any of the thread wraps that would be exposed from the prior one. Again, notice I'm still doing the 45-degree angle. So a typical high tie, you would tie it like this and fold it back on itself in a vertical plane. But again, we're creating V's, top and bottom, the whole way to get a better side-to-side profile. So this fly, I got the idea for this fly from a Bob Popovic's fly called a 3D fly. He used to do this with ultra hair. And this is just another way of achieving the same result. So now, you don't always have to do top and bottom alternated. I happen to be on the top, so I'll just stay here. You'll see we're getting pretty close to the hook eye, but we still have enough room to put in a few more applications. We'll take this white. Do the same thing. Now, one thing I like to do is a lot of the bait fish that we imitate in the Northeast, such as bunker, mullet, some other ones, they tend to have a little either lavender or pink on their side. So what you could do is take some pink fibers, you can use pink flash, whatever you'd like, and just do one tie on either side. It sort of gives it a little cheek, it gives it a little hot spot. You can use red to make it look more like gills. I'll fold it back on itself. And again, not only am I putting the pink there, but I'm increasing the width of the fly so that I'm starting to build the 360 look of the fly. Same thing, I'm taking the same piece, going to do the same thing, fold it over back on itself. This is just a very small hank of hair. So here we are, we're almost up at the hook eye. Now I'm going to show you how to finish off the fly. I probably left a little more room here than I would like to, but just to illustrate the technique, I think it's fine. Take another good size hank and fold it over on itself like this, and maybe in another time to make it a really dense little bundle. And what we'll do is we'll put this on top of the fly like this, and we will not fold it back. Now I'm not doing a V, I'm just doing a simple single wrap like that. Use your thumb to distribute it. Then we will take the white and do the same thing. And you can actually add some pink on the sides too if you want to increase, if you want to continue that sort of rosy cheek thing that we started back in the previous wrap. So again, remember, I have very few wraps here, so you got to be careful to hold it. And you don't want to have a lot of wraps there because we're going to push all these fibers back. So why don't we just, to get a little extra color there, you could put purple in there, sometimes yellow, bunker, and a lot of baitfish have yellow, and the sardinas do too, or like a bronzy color. Well, again, we'll do a little pink there, just one wrap. Take this pink and put it on the other side. It's just enough to give it color to surround the eyes. And there we are. So now we have this big mess, and it's right up against the hook eye. I don't have a little straw to push this back, but typically I would take a straw or a pen casing, like Bob Popovic's hollow tie technique, and I'd move all those fibers back like that. Make sure to grab every one. Get a few wraps of thread in there. Now what you should do is take all this fiber, you have it here, it looks like a big mess, and it looks like there's absolutely no room, if you can see, absolutely no room to tie it in. But if you gently make a dam of thread there, it's going to force all those fibers back, which does two things. It gives you a really tiny head, so you don't have a beak on the fly, and it also creates a very durable head because the fibers are being forced back on themselves. What you do is you start wrapping. Now I'm using this extremely fine mono. If you use a slightly thicker thread, like a monocord, or a Wapsi 140, it'll build up this head sooner. But I like this fine line. You can see it's already starting to be forced back. Just hold it back. And make sure, this is one of the advantages of a rotary vise, make sure that you're getting all of the fibers wrapped back. But you can see right now, looks like the white fibers are sticking out just a little bit less than a 90-degree angle, so you probably need a little more pressure there. If you're careful with your wraps, you can even lean it back into the material like this. And you have to put just enough pressure on so you don't break the thread, but you force all those fibers back. I think we probably have enough wraps now. But as you see, we don't have any big head on the fly. In fact, you barely notice that it's there. One thing about this thread is it's really springy, this mono thread. So I like to do 2 or 3 whip finishes. So there's one, just a 3 wrap whip finish. But if you don't, mono thread has a tendency to sort of come down on an avalanche and then it can spring off. So if you do 2 or 3 whip finishes, that won't happen. And we're going to glue this head anyway. So do that, and that is the construction of the fly, and the second half of it is how to trim it. But you see, that's a simple fly, and I was walking you through it, but you could have cranked that out in about 5 minutes to get all that material on there. Now, obviously, that's way too much material, so now what we're going to do is we're going to trim it to a baitfish shape. This is going to be a little hard to keep in focus, because I'll try to do it over here. Here's the key. So we have fibers, if you can see, all the way around. Am I still in the...
Yep.
What you do is, you take your, in my case I trim with my right hand. I squeeze the fly left to right, and I use my thumb as a guard. Can you still see it?
Yep, up left. There you go.
So what I'm doing is I'm aligning all those fibers and squeezing them left to right. I'll flip it over, do the exact same thing. Preen them all out. You can see there's all kinds of nonsense there that's not going to be part of the fly. We'll trim that out. So I've now squeezed top to bottom. Now what I'm going to squeeze is side to side and do the same thing. You can see that this again doesn't have the proper profile. But all we need to do is squeeze it and use our thumb as a guard. It's like making the first cuts with a razor blade when you're trimming a deer hair bass bug. You're just trying to get the rough profile of the bug so that then you can trim it to a proper baitfish shape. So now that we've got the basic shape in place, you can see it's still pretty messy. Put it back in the vise. Now you can use the rotary feature of your vise to start trimming it to a proper sort of conical shape. In general, I find the fly swims best if it comes to a point and has kind of a conical shape. So what you do is just rotate your vise, start trimming it this way. And you can already see that the front of the fly is starting to take a little bit more of a baitfish profile. And using that same squeeze technique, I can do this. What you'll find with most baitfish is that the top of the fly has just sort of a gentle, fairly flat back, but many of them have a deeper belly, so I'll often trim them that way. Same thing, squeeze, and trim right up to the hook bend. And so this is just a process. I take it in and out of the vise. I put it in and out of the vise. But you can see it's already starting to take on the profile of a baitfish. For instance, you can see I just trimmed that there. Another thing about a baitfish is that the typical shape of a baitfish is to have a taper. It tapers down to a point on the belly and then widens up at the shoulders and then reaches a point at the top. So remember, we started with the saddle hackles creating that top, and we're trying to continue that here. So typically the belly will be a little bit narrower when you look at it, well, I'll take it out of the vise, a little bit narrower than the top of the dorsal surface, because you want basically sort of a wider set of shoulders. Are you still able to see that?
Yep.
So what I'm doing here is I'm creating sort of a taper on that belly. And make sure that you have about an even amount of material on the left and the right side of the hook, because you want it to track properly. So from that big mess, so 3 minutes ago, that mess looked like it would never be a proper baitfish. Now we've got basically a pretty good baitfish profile. One thing about this material is it keeps its shape very well. But when you glue on the eyes, it can sometimes deform the head because you're squeezing it. So it's a good idea to leave it a little long, and then what we'll do now is we'll glue on some eyes. And when we put that on, we'll probably need to do some more trimming. So I'm using this glue called E6000, which I use just initially to attach the eyes. Just put a little dab there, a little dab there. A lot of commercially tied flies, you'll see they'll have enormous eyes, which can be a good attractor, but I personally don't like oversized eyes. I like them a little closer to the eyes of the natural. So here's what we'll do. I'm using these living eyes by Fish Skull, which I think are the best commercially available dome eyes. Just put that in there and touch it. One thing about eyes is they tend not to be right in the middle of a fly, like along the lateral line, so you want to put them slightly above the midsection of the fly. Put them in, give it a good squeeze like that, and they're held in place. And then we're going to coat over that with another glue, but you'll see because I spent so much time fussing with them, now I want to make sure that, that the taper is still proper. So I'll squeeze along the edge of the eyes. And again, if you look at the side of that, there's a little too much material there, so what you could do is you can pull the saddle hackle out of the way. And just make sure, I think we have a little more blue on this side. So now it's more uniform and it's going to swim and track better. And also have a better profile. So that's pretty much it. Then to finish off the fly, I like to coat it with this glue called Liquid Fusion. I have it in a little brush bottle. It's a water-based glue. And the reason I like this is because it gets absorbed into the head material and creates like a jacket around the eyes and make sure that the eyes will never come off. So it's a little drippy. You want to get it absorbed. You want to cover the thread wraps. And I have found that when the eyes are attached this way, you'd actually need a pair of pliers to get these eyes off. And you set that to dry, and you might do a little more trimming once you're done. It's easy to over trim these things. But again, I'm seeing a little extra fibers there, and that pretty much completes the fly. And that's the Kinky Muddler.
Flip it out. Turn it so we can see it. There you go.
And here you can see it from the head on. One of the things I like about this fly is it looks like a baitfish head on.
There you go. Turn sideways.
Here's the underside. That's the completed fly.
Nice. Turn vertical. Yeah.